Hey guys, this is ZMH Tech here, and today we're gonna show you how to render. This is like a complete rendering tutorial in Blender for images and animations. Now, basically, I'm making this video because I had to learn this for Large Dog VR Studio. It's where I make VR animations in Blender. I have a few high dive animations. They're going to be posted on YouTube, or they may already be on YouTube. And then I'm going to be building I'm almost done with a baseball game for the HTC Vive. HTC Vive, yeah. So basically, if you're into that VR animations and video games, you would want to go check that out at largedogvrstudio.com. I'll put a link in the description. But the reason I'm making this tutorial is because I had to learn how to render for the animations. Now, I had to go through a bunch of tutorials to find little bits and details of different things. So I'm putting together one tutorial that covers all that. Now, basically, it's not that hard once you get started and you get to know what you do, but there are a lot of options. You just need to know what they do. So we have our little scene that I used the last time in the last videos on how to bake the textures and then how to export those textures to Unity and how to use them in Blender. So basically, we're just going to go through all of these. I'm going to explain almost all of these. I'm just going to explain basically what you need to know and which ones actually which ones actually do the performance, basically. So let's get started with this. So I'm in Cycles Render. That does matter. Most of this stuff is in Blender Render, but some of it's not. So Cycles, I would use Cycles. Most people are using Cycles. Cycles is more advanced, obviously. So just keep that in mind. So first thing is up here. This basically tell it, render an image and animation or an audio. Obviously, I'm not going to cover everything because you guys should already pretty much know most of this stuff. The display. Okay, so the display is basically if you're trying to render something. If you wanted to keep the UI, image editor, full screen, or new window. So basically, I use image editor and keep UI. Image editor, basically, what's that going to do? When you click render, we'll make it go up to 100. When you click render, it's basically going to do this inside of the image editor, and you're going to see it rendering. This is good for like a single animation. When it's done outputting, you can save it. So not a single animation, a single image. But when you want it to go faster, basically, like for an animation, for example, like those high dive animations that I built took me like a month almost to run. For them to build all the frames. So basically, if you have something like that you're rendering, or even an image, images can take a few hours, maybe a day or two. You're going to want to basically switch it over to Keep UI. Now, obviously, when you click Keep UI, it's just going to keep the UI. So there is that, and that's a lot quicker. It goes a lot faster. Because it doesn't have to actually display back and back to the screen. That actually, if you're using the CPU, will go a lot faster because the CPU is the thing that gets used to display those images back to the screen. So you may not notice it much on the GPU, but the CPU will definitely boost with a Keep UI. And where the heck would you save it? That's basically down here in the output. You're gonna just select the folder for it to save. So basically, now we've got the device. Now, CPU and GPU. Now, if you don't have that, you may just have the CPU as an option. We're going to want to go to user preferences. And then basically, I'm trying to remember where it is. I haven't done this in a while. Part over here. Oh yeah, over here. If you just have that CPU option, if you're in Blender Render, you're just gonna have the CPU option. That's it. If you're in Cycles, you may just have the CPU option. Obviously, GPU is gonna go a lot faster. So if you're in Cycles, you're gonna want to go to User Preferences, System, and then over here, click on CUDA, and then select your graphics card, obviously, and then you're gonna hit exit. Now, this doesn't, unfortunately, Blender does not work with AMD cards. So, because that, I think OpenCL, I think that's what it was for NVIDIA. I mean, for ATI, and then NVIDIA's got the CUDA. So it only works with NVIDIA. So keep that in mind, obviously. If you're going to be buying a new card, obviously you're going to want, if you're using Blender, you're going to want an NVIDIA. So the next thing is resolution. Now, it's obviously going to be the size and the resolution of that image. Now, you guys know you can change it. What I like to do is always keep it at 100% and then just type in your resolution manually. So then that basically, then you'll get your resolution. And you can Google, obviously, what's the 4K resolution? What's the 8K resolution? And then it will tell you. So basically, actually, I think I know those off the top of my head. So you've got for 720p, which is partial HD, you'd have 1280 at 720. For 1080p, which is HD basically, that is a 1920 by 1080. 2K, some monitors do 2K. That's 2256 by 1440. For 4K, that's 3840 by 2160. And then I don't know 8K off the top of my head, so let's look that up real quick. I think I know it, but I don't want to be wrong on this. And I mean, there's lots of other little in-between things, okay, that's 7680 by 4320. Okay, so those are your resolutions. And I mean, you've got I know on the TV I got, it says UHD, which is supposed to be ultra high def 4K or something like that. So it's basically, when I looked at it on the computer, basically this number was just bumped up to this number. So basically they got a lot of little in-between little things. I know 2K's got a lot of variants on it. So basically you're just going to want to know basically, this is basically a good standard thing. I just use standards. So basically, this is a good little thing. I'll put this in the description maybe if you guys would need that. Maybe that'll come in handy. But that's basically what you want to do for the resolution. Always keep it at 100. Put it in a standard usually. Your start frame, your end frame, that's only for animations. And that's basically let's say you had 100 an animation that's 100 frames long. you want to start at 1, go to 100, or maybe you did some, last week. Maybe then you start at 20, go to 100, stuff like that. Frame step, obviously, just leave that at 1. Um, Aspect ratio, leave it 1. Frame rate's basically how many frames per second in your animation. Um, so I don't know. I mean, if you just have something like this, um, and then we can quickly just make a small little animation. So on 24 frames a second, it would take, you can figure that out, 100 divided by 24, that's how long that just took. So then obviously if you wanted it to be, faster, 60 frames or whatever, we can see it moved a lot quicker. Then now, that's not for moving stuff quick, so don't think that. Just first, that's just basically how many frames a second. So basically, it's going to use 60 frames per 1 second or 30 frames per 1 second. So the high dive animations I did were in 30 because if it took me a month to do 30 frames a second and I don't want to speed up anything, I want it to be the same, that's going to actually take me double the amount of time to do 60. So that's why I did 30. Usually, you've got like the most popular ones are like 24, 30, sometimes 29.97, 60. So basically, you just have to play around with it. So then you don't really need to worry about any of those. Metadata would just be metadata that you can put in there. The output is where you want to save the animation or the image, and you got little things. This is where you pick your image. One thing I do want to, actually, I'll explain it in a minute. Your image. So basically, I like PNG. I mean, you can Google, what, BMP versus, PNG and stuff like that. But for me, I pick PNG for all my images, RGBA, and then I usually do compression 100%. That works really good with animations. When you have lots of images, I usually do color bit 16, and I'll make the compression 100%. This you don't really need to know about. Sampling. Sampling is important too. So now, basically, sampling is how many samples it takes. So basically what that means is basically when it's rendering, what it does is it takes like a shot and then it gets a light back to it, and then that's one sample. And it keeps doing that. And the more it does that, basically the better, less grainier, better your image is going to look. Like if you've noticed, when we go to render, actually I can cap it for you guys so you can notice. Cap this at 5. Okay, now you see how grainy that image is? That's because it's only at 5 samples. Now watch, if we bump it up just a little bit, you see how it gets less grainy? That's what samples do, basically. They make them less grainy. Now, obviously, those are super grainy because I have it set to that because I want to show you guys something else in the next part. But basically, as you can see, it removes the graininess. So the previews is at 32, I think, which is what you see every time you click that render button. The render, I don't know. I mean, you're really going to have to just play around with it. The more you do, the longer it's going to take this. Now, this and the resolution will be the main 2 factors of why your image or animation is taking as long as it is. So If you want to reduce the time, mess with those two basically. And if you can't really mess with those two, then you know, um, then basically I'll show you how to mess with other things to get the time down. So, but those two will be the deciding factors of how long it will take your hardware to do it. So basically, I don't know. You're really gonna have to just play around with it and see what it looks good. My animations, I think I did 80 just because it took so long. Um, and 80 was a little grainy, but it's an animation, and my animation was the camera was moving, so you weren't really gonna notice it a lot. So I did 80. I wanted to do like 150, um, but basically it just was gonna take too long. So now basically there's that law of diminishing returns. Um, Obviously applies to resolution, but it's going to apply to this too. I can show you with the preview. Basically, as we can see, as this keeps getting more and more and more and more samples, I can't really tell a difference, really. Like once it passed like maybe like 80 or 100 for this scene, I mean, it don't look any different. 300 didn't really look any different than 100. I mean, we can go even higher. But I mean, we're not seeing anything. So basically, you don't want to just put it as the maximum, even if your hardware could do it, because it's not really helping anything. So basically, this is how you would. I've never seen this in a two roll, but basically, this is how I figured out um, how my scene, what samples. Most people say just play around with it, but this is how I actually figured it out. Is basically just cap it, as you can see. I have it capped at 1,000, and then, if it was still grainy, once it got to 1,000, let's just say it was still grainy, maybe I'd go like 1,100, and then let it run, and then let me see, does it look still grainy? Does it not? And then that can also kind of give you a time estimate too, like the 100 samples, that took like 10 seconds because this is a very small scene. But, if it took you like a long time, then, maybe, so you would know, like, well, is the performance worth how long that took? So, basically, that's how you would figure it out. It's basically start real low, like at 30, um, and then basically just keep bumping it up, maybe 50, 80, 100, maybe 150, 200. I've noticed most things like after like 400 kind of are like diminished returns. Basically, after 400, most things don't look any better. Metal, metal can get up there. It looks better with more samples. But like more like diffuse type objects look good at with just little samples. So that's how you would do it. And then obviously make sure you set that back to 32 at the preview. So when you go to load that preview again, it doesn't start to go to 1,000 or something again. So that's a quick little tip for that. Now basically clamp direct, clamp indirect, and the seed. Um, Basically, it's hard to explain these, so I'm not going to get technical in this video, but basically, why would you use these? You use these basically to speed up your render time, basically to make the lighting not as good, but it still looks good to where you can't tell a difference. So basically, these will speed up render time like crazy. Another thing is um, basically these are good if you have a lot of fireflies in your scene, which we do, and that's why I made this kind of like this. You can mess around with the numbers. But basically, these will remove. As you can see, it's a little bit smoother. We still got fireflies, but I mean, look at that compared back to this. You can tell down here there is something, but you couldn't really tell down there when you had it. So these will remove, but this is a very fireflied scene. That's why I set it up like this. So basically, like those will remove the fireflies, and I'll add this, but I want to make another. I think I'm going to make another tutorial basically on how to remove fireflies, just real quick. But I'll add it into this one while you guys are watching. But anyways, basically that's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is checking your sun, which is why this one has it actually. The sun is too bright, so if you bump that down, it'll look better. Um, Obviously that was the real color. It wasn't a maple type table. It was a brown oak or something like that. The sun was just too intense, and that's why it was fireflying. That's one thing. Another thing that's kind of important is the sun color. Don't have it as pure white. A lot of times, that and also your materials. If you go into your materials, only your procedural materials, obviously, or I guess really any. If there's a white material on here, basically the pure white, the FF, don't have it. Don't have anything that's pure white. It totally creates fireflies. And I had this in a one of the animations. I could not figure out how to get rid of these fireflies in one of the high dives, and then I realized, oh, if you change the pure white, it goes away. So basically, if you have a white, like we do here, you want to just basically drag it down a little bit, and it will help. It will help get rid of the fireflies. So I like to use D1, D1, D1. That seems to work for me. But basically, that's how you get rid of fireflies real quick. So try those out. And those should work. The seed, basically, if you're using clamp direct and clamp indirect, if you're doing an animation, make sure you click this for seed. Because what it will do is it will basically change the light, but it will do it differently every image. So basically, you can't pick up on, oh yeah, the lighting looks a little different for some reason. So then you really don't need to worry about that. Light paths, I mean, those could be another issue of fireflies. This is also another why is my render taking so long thing. You can change these. They have them way too high. A lot of times you can just change these down, like a lot down, and like nothing really happens. You basically just need to play around with it. These also can sometimes cause the fireflies. So you may just want to, play around with these too. Don't need to really do anything on these. Now performance. This is huge. Basically, leave everything alone. I've looked into these; they don't really help. But the one thing here is this thing. This thing will definitely boost your render times. Now, there's different. I mean, instead of playing around with this, just use this simple rule of thumb. If you're rendering on a CPU, set this to a 64 by 64. Sometimes, it depends on the CPU. I think by default it wants you to do 8 or something like that, which is entirely too small. Sometimes like a 32 would work. I found on most of my CPUs that I've used, the 64 seems to work. If you're doing a GPU, try 256 by 256. the bigger sizes work better for GPUs. But don't go over that because it will crash your driver. So you just want to do 256 by 256. But this definitely will speed it up big time if you have the right setting. Post processing, we're not going to talk about, and then bake, obviously, we're not going to talk about. So, yeah, that's about it for this tutorial. I mean, we can just do a quick, we'll do a quick test just to show you guys. But basically, that's it. So if you don't want to watch the test, thank you for watching this. And I hope you learn this, and now you can apply this to your own scenes. If you want to stick around, watch the test to show how fast these little improvements go, you're more than welcome to. So basically, we're going to just make this like a lot. So it's hard. And it takes a while. I guess 1912 by 1080 is fine. And we'll just do keep UI. So actually we'll do image editor. That's all defaulted. And we'll leave it at that because I'm doing the GPU. Just see if everything is default. Compression doesn't have anything to do with the render time either. So just if you guys know that. Animation technically it will because it has to save the file, and saving the file with a high compression will take like a minute or something. But the actual render time has nothing to do with it. So basically, let's hit the render button. This is just with stock settings. And then let's try and get an estimated time. It looks like it's getting stable around 6.5 minutes. Okay, so that was stock settings. So then what we're going to want to do now is we can change some stuff up. So we're going to go keep UI. Switch this down to a 4 and a 3. Change this down a little bit. Put those. Take a look at it. I mean, I can't tell a difference. Looks the same, kind of. Okay, so now if we hit the render button, we can see we're getting about 440. Okay, so we went from 630 to 440. So if we convert that to seconds, so we got about a 28% increase in speed, basically. just by changing those settings on this scene. So, I mean, it's going to be different for every scene, but as you can see, this is a pretty simple scene. You got 28%. So you guys may get higher. I know when I did this on my animations, the high dive animations, I got over 50%. So it's just going to depend, but that's why I made this tutorial, because I didn't see a tutorial that was explaining all of this and kind of combining it, you know, and showing you how to figure out what your sample size should be and all that. So I hope you guys, you know, enjoy this tutorial and are able to improve your quality and your render times, basically, of your scenes. And thank you for watching this tutorial. All right, hey guys, this is a quick edit of the video of how to completely render. One thing I forgot to mention was basically, if you're going to render an animation, switch to cycles real quick. If you're going to render an animation, you always want to do an image file thing, and then you just set your output, and then it will output the images for you. Like it will do like 0001, 0002. I know it has built-in movies for, you know, MPEG and H.264. Those are the most popular probably, but you don't want to render directly to an animation. I mean, directly to a video file. There's a few reasons for that. Number one is basically, like, if you had like a power outage or something like that, you know, you would just lose, let's say, you know, each image takes an hour to make. Like, you would just lose the image you were on, so that'd be one image, you know? But if you were doing a video, let's say it's like a 2-day render, and, you know, you're like a day and a half in and the power went out, you would lose that whole video, basically. So you always want to have it render animations to images first. And then basically another reason is because let's say you get the video and then you're like, oh, I forgot to add this, or I didn't like the color of this, or this should be changed. Like with an image, you can see it, you know, after the first hour maybe or something. So you can decide, like, oh, you know, or basically, or let's just say one little piece of that, one little scene that you forgot, you know, you forgot to, you know, change the color of something. With the video, basically, you'd have, you know, the whole video you have to do again. With the images, you just have to rerun that one image. So re-render that one image. So basically, that's another reason. Another reason is basically you have way more control of your animation. You know, you can set, once you get all the images, you can set them, you know, you can pick the file container and the you know, just all that stuff. You know, how good quality. I think like in H.264 and H.265, I think they have the CRF. You know, basically like it'll be the same resolution, but one will look better than the other. That's because of the CRF. So I mean, you know, you have a lot more control over your options when you have those images, and then you're converting them to a video outside of Blender. You can, you know, control everything about your animation. So you really just want to, that was the last part I forgot to add on that render complete tutorial, but you really just want to always render to an image if you're building an animation. So, all right, thanks for watching this part of the tutorial.